Overcome in Tokyo. I could have tagged this onto the end of the last chapter so the tour was all together, but Japan really does deserve a chapter of its own. We landed 3 days before our first of 3 shows in Tokyo, and this gave us a little time to explore. We still had a lot of press commitments, but there didn't seem to be too many demands on our time. We were unfortunate to arrive in the middle of the rainy season. That's not so bad, you might think. As long as you dress for the weather, you should be okay. The only drawback at this time of the year is that whilst it's raining, the temperature's still very high and the humidity's unbearable. You'd leave the hotel dressed for showers and within minutes you'd be sweating like fuck, and every movement induced more sweat. We had a Japanese tour guide to show us around, provided by the promoter, Mr. Udo. He was, and still is, the biggest promoter in Japan, and one of his guys, Tak, was showing us the sights. Tokyo is an amazing place. Mad, but amazing. The constant rainfall mixed with the neon lights and little people milling about everywhere made it seem like we were on the set of Blade Runner. It really is a foreign land because there's nothing familiar about anything you encounter. Ian Jeffrey was married to a Japanese girl and had visited the country several times with other bands, so between him and Tak we were ensured of seeing the best that the crazy capital had to offer. Where do you begin to start describing this wonderful place? When we arrived at the hotel, there were plenty of fans around the reception and the hotel bar, but Tak warned everyone about the dangers of any liaisons with some of the more experienced ones. I don't wish to take the piss out of Tak or his accent, but on spotting 2 familiar faces amongst the throng, he said, "Those 2 girls were here last week with Eric Clapton. Stay away from them, they have clubs and crap." This might be a little politically incorrect, but you can see why I had to mention it. Every one of these Japanese schoolgirls seemed to have a present for one of the band. You'd be sitting in your hotel room and every hour or two there was a knock on the door and you'd open it to reveal a bowing teenager offering a parcel. I got a watch with a built-in radio, a number of kimonos personalised with my Japanese initials, t-shirts, stuffed toys and lots of other small trinkets. I remember there was one girl who was camped out in the lobby of the hotel all the time we were staying there and she was knitting me a jumper. By the time we left, she'd not completed her task, and I remember her being comforted by 2 of her friends as I waved goodbye from the departing bus. She seemed inconsolable and barely able to stand. Later, when we travelled by bullet train to Osaka and Nagoya, there'd be fans to greet us at the stops in between, and whilst the train was in the station, they would wave, scream, and take photographs from the platform. Amazing fans that humbled you with their kindness and generosity. The video game arcades were also a few notches up from Pac-Man and Defender, and for the first couple of days we were spending our time and our yen trying to master them. It was the first place I'd seen motorbikes that you actually sat on and flung from side to side as you drove round the Suzuka racetrack. The arcades were full of amazing new games and rows of pachinko machines. This was a Japanese game that was like vertical pinball, and I've never tried it, so my explanation ends here. The video games were not the only place where the electronics were miles ahead of the West. We saw beatbox radio cassette players that had CD players in the top. You can buy them in Tesco now for a tenner, but back then these were unavailable for export, as were in-car CD players. We were staying near Shinjuku where hundreds of electronics shops had their wares out on the street competing for your yen. I picked up one of the very first Canon SureShot cameras while I was there, and a Sony Professional Walkman. I still have both today and both still function. We were all given a present each of a Casio watch that had a built-in calendar, alarms and electronic phone book. How flash were we when we got home and stored new acquaintances' numbers in our watch? We did a couple of TV shows while we were there and I managed to cop another Washburn guitar for my growing collection from their Japanese rep. TV shows are all very similar wherever you are in the world, but this was the first time we'd been given our own sushi chef in the dressing room beforehand. We walked in to see this guy setting up his little stand before sharpening his knives and dishing up small portions to us in between the rehearsals and the broadcast. We were all stuffing our faces with sushi at every opportunity, but after 3 days of this we fancied something other than fish and rice. Mr. Udo was taking us out for a meal and asked us what we fancied. Steak and chips would be nice. We travelled to this skyscraper and get in a lift and travel about 50 floors up and get out at this restaurant. Mr. Udo explains that we'll be having Kobe beef. This is beef that comes from cows that are massaged while they drink beer and listen to music. Who wouldn't want that? I mean the massage and the beer, not so much the Kobe beef. I remember Paul saying, I'm getting a picture in my mind of a half-pissed cow in headphones listening to the Eurythmics whilst getting a rub down. The beef turns up on the table and is almost white. The massaging means that the fat, or marbling, is spread thinly and distributed evenly throughout the flesh. It's fried in front of us, teppanyaki style, and tastes like very creamy beef. And as we're visiting pop stars, Mr. Udo's even organised some chips to go with it. The other memory of this restaurant was looking out of the windows as we were leaving and realising that we were above the clouds and all we can see is the tops of other tall buildings. Another Blaze Runner moment. I don't know how much the bill came to, but I was glad that none of us were in the chair when it landed. Kobe beef is ridiculously expensive, and for a place of this calibre, I reckon it must have cost a couple of £100 per head. The earlier emotional outburst of the knitting teenager seems even more unusual when you think about how reserved the Japanese are as a race. This is no more apparent than when they are sitting in an audience in front of you. We were told before our first show not to expect too much in terms of reaction and that dancing and screaming are rarer than rocking or shite. When a song ends, it's greeted with syncopated polite applause. Even subtle changes in the lighting were greeted with small smatterings of applause. By the third concert, we were giving it loads to try and gain a bigger reaction, and we were surprised that Holly was taken up on his invitation when he asked people to get up and dance, and there were a few asses wiggling in the aisles. We took the bullet train from Tokyo to Osaka, and the audience reaction was a little more raucous than in Tokyo. Claire and Paul's partner Joe had landed in Tokyo whilst we were on stage and were joining us for the last leg of the tour. It had been months since I'd seen Claire, and it was great that she had secured the time off work to come out and experience Japan. We'd booked a holiday in Florida and would be flying there as soon as the tour was finished. We took the train from Osaka to Nagoya before returning to Tokyo for the final show. There had been times during the tour when we'd turned up at soundcheck and caught our respective techs playing Relax. Colin Claydon on drums, French John on bass and Glenn Saggers on guitar. This gave us an idea for the ultimate tour prank. When Holly would go out for the encore, he would go alone and engage the crowd in a bit of banter. You know the drill. The guys won't come out unless you scream, and he would goad them until they made enough noise for us to appear. He would hear the roar and would not have to look around to see us on stage. He would just wait for the intro synth for Relax and start his vocal intro. We finished the gig and prepare for the encore. Holly goes out front and says a couple of Japanese words he'd learnt, thanking the audience, etc. He hears the synth intro and starts singing. He's well into the first verse before he looks down and sees the four of us staring up at him from the front of the stage. We're all giving him the finger and laughing. He drops the microphone and John Rinaldi, our slide guy, picks it up and carries on where Holly left off. He was a legend. We climb on stage to join Holly, who's dancing while the crew groove away. Some members of the audience haven't noticed the change in personnel and think we're invading the stage. This is all the invitation they need to join us. The gig ends as a bit of a shambles with the whole crew, band and about 50 of the audience dancing to Relax. We eventually got the reaction we wanted from our fans and we were told it was the first time there'd been a stage invasion since the Specials had played years before and the gig had descended into a riot. This wasn't a riot, but it was definitely a Tokyo party. After the show, we're presented with beautiful kimonos by Mr. Udo and posed for pictures wearing them. The band and all the crew went out for a meal to celebrate the end of what had been a very successful tour. We'd lost money but gained many friends, and it was time for a holiday and a recharging of the batteries. After that, we had a new album to think about.